Hello, everybody. Today we are going to in a bit different direction, I suppose. Uh, this time, the first and foremost of my intentions when I was going through the Communist Manifesto was not to show any political affiliation uh, and just to enjoy, or maybe not so much of enjoy the thought itself, right? And one of the things that I noticed about myself, and therefore I might assume that most of people work approximately in the same way, is that if I study something for a long period of time and I dedicate a lot of my thinking to a thing, I would start more or less sympathize with the thought and uh, idea might recruit me into its ranks, right? So the one and only antidote to that I found is to have some opposing ideas present more or less at the same time. So uh, this is not a serious critique of the Communist Manifesto, which probably would be more appropriate now. But again, I'd like to go to a bit of different direction here, so it wouldn't be as much of a political swing all the way to just go from Communist Manifesto to the exact opposite of it, which I don't know at the moment what it could be. But we have a very interesting novel here, Animal Farm, which I have not read yet, and this is probably a loss on my side. And it's time to cover up for this loss, right? It is a beast fable for those of you who don't know. I read a small introduction to this book, and it said that this is a beast fable, which is a very popular way of writing a satire. A lot of authors across the whole globe uh, did something like that. Uh, and this exact political satire, as they say, was inspired by Russian Revolution, which was a communist revolution, right? So there is a certain connection between Communist Manifesto and uh, Animal Farm here. Of course, this is not a it's not a comprehensive study. It is just some thoughts of one man, of George Orwell. But this book is very revered and revered in a equal measure, I guess, and it would be a shame if we would miss it completely. So, without wasting any more time, I'll just go straight into it and we will enjoy it. Just as before, I have some place to have a notes that I would want to take during the reading. I took I would like to take a little bit of different course with my notes now. I'm not going to try to make a note for every chapter or for every paragraph, of course, but rather of some ideas that I would consider worth to investigate a bit further. So it's not going to be a direct summarization or some short version of the Animal Farm. I'm not taking that uh, into my aims, right? So let's go. Animal Farm by George Orwell. Chapter 1. Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen houses for the night, but was too drunk to remember to shut up the pop holes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the yard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself at last a last glass of beer from the barrel in the scullery, and made his way to the bed, where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. Yep. As soon as the light in the bedroom went out, there was a stirring and fluttering all through the farm buildings. Word has gone around during the day that old Major, the prize middle white boar, had had a strange dream of on the previous night and wished to communicate it to other animals. It had been agreed that they should all meet in the big barn as soon as Mr. Jones was safely out of the way. Old Major, so he was always called, though the name under which he had been exhibited was Wellington Beauty, was so highly regarded on the farm that everyone was quite ready to lose an hour of sleep in order to hear what he had to say. At the end of the big barn, on a sort of raised platform, Major was already ensconced. I'm gonna need to check this word because I'm not familiar with it. Establish or settle someone in a comfortable, safe place. Okay. Major was already
Ensconce.
ensconced. Ensconced on his bed of straw under a lantern which hung from a beam. He was 12 years old and had lately grown rather stout, but he was still a majestic-looking pig, with a wise and a benevolent appearance in spite of the fact that his tushes has never been cut. Before long, the other animals began to arrive and make themselves comfortable around their different fashions. First came the three dogs, Bluebell, Jessie, Pincher, and then the pigs, who settled out in the straw immediately in front of the platform. The hens perched themselves on the window sills, the pigeons fluttering up to the rafters, the sheep and cow lay down behind the pigs and began to chew the cud. The two cart horses, Boxer and Clover, came together, walking very slowly and setting down their vast hairy hoofs with great care, lest there should be some small animal concealed in the straw. Clover was a stout, motherly mare, approaching middle life, who had never quite got her figure back after the forced fall. Boxer was an enormous beast, nearly 18 hands high, and as strong as any two ordinary horses put together. A white stripe down his nose gave him a somewhat stupid appearance, and in fact he was not of first-rate intelligence, but he was universally respected for his steadiness of character and tremendous power of work. After the horses came Muriel, the white goat, and Benjamin, the donkey. Benjamin was the oldest animal on the farm, and the worst tempered. He seldom talked, and when he did, it was usually to make some cynical remark. For instance, he would say that God had given him a tail to keep his flies off, but that he would sooner have had no tails and no flies. Interesting remark. Alone among the animals on the farm, he never laughed. If asked why, he would say that he saw nothing to laugh at all. To laugh at. Nevertheless, without openly admitting it, he was devoted to Boxer. The two of them usually spent their Sundays together in the small paddock beyond the orchard, grazing side by side and never speaking. That's an interesting character. The two horses had just lain down when a brood of ducklings, which had lost their mother, filed into the barn, chipping feebly and wandering from side to side to find some place where they would not be trodden off. Clover made a sort of wall around them with her great foreleg, and the ducklings nested down inside it and promptly fell asleep. At the last moment, Molly, the foolish, pretty white mare, who drew Mr. Jones' trap, came mincing daintily in, chewing at a lump of sugar. She took a place near the front and began flirting her white mane hoping to draw attention to the red ribbons it was plated with. Last of all came the cat, who looked round as usual for the warmest place, and finally squeezed herself in between Boxer and Clover. There she purred contentedly throughout Major's speech without listening to a word of what he was saying. All the animals were now present except Moses, the tame raven, who slept on a perch behind the back door. When Major said they had all made themselves comfortable and were waiting attentively, he cleared his throat and began. Comrades, you have heard already about the strange dream that I had last night. But I will come to dream later. I have something else to say first. I do not think, comrades, that I shall be with you for many months longer, and before I die, I feel it my duty to pass on to you such wisdom as I have acquired. I have had a long life. I have had much time for thought as I lay alone in my stall, and I think I may say that I understand the nature of life on this earth as well as any animal now living. It is about this that I wish to speak to you. Now, comrades, what is the nature of the life of ours? Let's face it, our lives are miserable, laborious, and short. We are born, we are given just so much food as will keep the breath in our bodies, and those of us who are capable of it are forced to work to the last atom of our strength. In the very instant that our usefulness has come to an end, we are slaughtered with hideous cruelty. No animal in England knows the meaning of happiness or leisure after he is a year old. No animal in England is free. The life of an animal is misery and slavery. That is the plain truth. But is this simply part of the order of nature? Is it because this land of ours is so poor that it cannot afford a decent life to those who dwell upon it? No, comrades, 1,000 times no. The soil of England is fertile, its climate is good, it is capable of affording food in abundance to an enormous greater number of animals than now inhabited. This single farm of ours will support a dozen horses, 20 cows, hundreds of sheep, and all of them living in a comfort and a dignity that are now almost beyond our imagination. Why then do we continue in this miserable condition? Because nearly the whole of the produce of our labor is stolen from us by human beings. There, comrades, is the answer to all our problems. It is summed up in a single word: man. Man is the only real enemy we have. Remove man from the scene, and the root cause of hunger and overwork is abolished forever. I already like how they identified the problem, uh, the exploitation, the production of the labor is stolen from the workers, and overwork is going to, and the choice of words are matter here, abolished. This is a word that is extensively used in the Communist Manifesto. So, yeah, okay. Though I would sympathize to those animals just because, well, their lives are not very good, and it's not like they are going to be improved anytime soon. Too. Uh, yeah, of course, in nature they don't live very peacefully, and they die very young and brutally most of the time. But now it's like they achieved their peak conditions of life, so they only have to work for the sake of enlarging their lifetime, increasing their lifetime. This is also something. And if they have more or less peaceful end, well, of course, it's going to be not so peaceful because, it, well, basically, it will end in the slaughterhouse. But if it's made in humane way, in comparison to what would await those animals in nature, that might be considered the better end. But again, of course, I still feel some empathy to animals with all that said. Okay, coming back to the text. Man is the only creature that consumes without producing. He does not give milk, he does not lay eggs. He is too weak to pull the plow. He cannot run fast enough to catch rabbits. Yet he is lord of all the animals. He sets them to work, he gives back to them the bare minimum that will prevent them from starving, and the rest he keeps for himself. Our labor tills the soil, our dung fertilizes it. And yet there is not one of us that owns more than his bare skin. You cows that I see before me, how many thousands of gallons of milk have you given during this last year? And what has happened to that milk which should have been breeding up sturdy cows? Every drop of it has gone down the throats of our enemies. And you, hens, how many eggs have you laid in this last year, and how many of those eggs have ever hatched into chickens? The rest have all gone to market to bring in money for Jones and his men. And you, Clover, where are those 4 foals you bore, who should have been the support and pleasure of your old age? Each was sold at a year old. You will never see one of them again. In return for your 4 confinements and all your labor in the fields, what have you ever had except your bare rations and a stall? And even the miserable lives we lead are not allowed to reach their natural span. For myself, I do not grumble, for I am one of the lucky ones. I am 12 years old and have had over 400 children. Such is the natural life of a pig. But no animal escapes the cruel knife in the end. You young porkers who are sitting in front of me, every one of you will scream for your lives out at the block within a year. To that horror we all must come, cows, pigs, hens, sheep, everyone. Even the horses and the dogs have no better fate. You boxers, the very day that those great muscles of yours lose their power, Jones will sell you to the knacker, who will cut your throat and boil you down for the foxhounds. As for the dogs, when they grow old and toothless, Jones ties a brick round their neck and drowns them in the nearest pond. It is not crystal clear, then, comrades, that all the evils of this life are ours, springing from the tyranny of human beings? Only get rid of man, and the produce of our labor would be ours own. Would be our own. Almost overnight, we could become rich and free. What then must we do? Why work night and day, body and soul, for the overthrow of the human race? This is my message to you, comrades. Rebellion. I do not know when that rebellion will come. It might be in a week or in 100 years. But I know, as surely as I see the straw beneath my feet, that sooner or later justice will be done. Fix your eyes on that, comrades, throughout the short remainder of your lives. And above all, pass on this message of mine to those who come after you, so that future generations will carry on the struggle until it is victorious. And remember, comrades, your resolution must never falter. No argument must lead you astray. Never listen when they tell you that man and the animals have a common interest, that the prosperity of the one is the prosperity of the others. It is all lies. Man serves the interests of no creature except himself, and among us animals, let there be perfect unity, perfect comradeship in the struggle. All men are enemies, all animals are comrades. Well, this guy, Major, he knows how to speak, that's for sure. I already feel a lot of sympathy for animals. Well, for obvious reasons, because what he describes in some way is truth, right? So, and I could absolutely empathize with that. And of course, this Major is probably an architect of a rebellion, of revolution. Probably the most likely analogy that I could see for now is that he is Marx and Engels in one face. Now, the thing that I could say here is that when I read through Communist Manifesto, I I kind of already knew what is going to be described there, so I didn't have to suspend my disbelief because I never really let the disbelief to set in, right? So I read it because as a historical fact, right? But now that I read through this beautiful analogy, which may or may not be a perfect example of the same line of thinking, uh, I I don't know. Maybe it's because the uh, beast fable as a genre makes you think about what's happening here more than when you read something that is revered as a major document, one of the greatest historical documents of all time, right? So you kind of have to when you read Communist Manifesto, you are well, if you have any humility at all, you would always have somewhere in the back of your head a thought that would tell that, well, so many people consider this is one of, if not the greatest document of all time, right? So many lives were put to the cause that is described there. So even if you don't believe in everything in that, you kinda don't get to fully criticize it because, like, who are you exactly, right? And this is exactly what I had in my mind when I read through this text, right? But here, I can already kind of identify some problems with that. And the first one, I already spent some time before I described what the problems could be. Uh, First of all, is that in the nature itself, those beasts would not meet more peaceful end. So even though they are exploited and, well, slaughtered at the end of their, let's call it, useful lifespan, in the nature they would probably meet their doom much faster, and the doom will be way more brutal for most of the animals because they will be torn apart. So the butcher's knife will be will look like a mercy to them, right? And yes, they do not have some sort of overabundance of food and leisure. Of course, they do not have it in the great abundance. Sorry, but they sort of have community, if you may say so, about animals, because we know that many animals are social animals and they do require company, and they may lose company in nature, and that would doom them, because when a social animal has been torn away from the social group, it tends to make poorer decisions. It has basically a target on its back, and all predators would rather attack the single animal that has absolutely no way of protecting itself. No way at all. Even for those animals that do generally not have any more ways of protecting itself. For example, like a group of zebras, right? They have no capacity to of like fighting off an attack of lions. But in the group, they kind of do that because those lions are distracted. How those zebras are all look alike, and they have a way harder time choosing the target and then pursuing the correct targets. And so lions that actually hunt in groups, they have way harder time coordinating their attacks, and usually it means that they will be left with less of what's it called? No, not treasure, with less of the prey that they would hunt down, right? So that is to say about zebras that are in group as social animals. But if a single zebra would be targeted by a lion, it's doomed, right? So absolutely no way of protecting itself. But also all that way of organizing themselves in a group, the social aspect, they make animals psychologically dependent on each other also. So at farms, when, well, of course, I'm not sure that there are such animal farm exists that would breed zebras, but somewhere they absolutely sure, I'm sure some of the farms do, but it's not a typical farm. But whatever, I mean that animals have social group, which is important for some of them at least, if not all of them. They have food, they have shelter, they have more or less peaceful end, and nothing of that is makes their fate fair. Nothing of that would make their end peaceful, even though it is more humane that it would be in nature, as I described already. But it is a better mode of being than the one that they might have in the nature. Of course, there are farms that are absolutely hideous and are no short of animal abuse, and this is not no joke, no joking matter. Of course, I feel sorry for those animals, uh, but in general, a good farmer cares about the animals at the farm. A good farmer would even love those animals, even though he will need to, well, eventually cut the throats of most of his animals. That is the nature of the farm. And so, good farmer on a productive farm would not abuse animals beyond the like general uh, way of exploiting those animals, right? Uh, so this would lead me to another point: is that Major here, this uh, big boar, uh, he didn't saw any other farms, as I suspect from this speech of his. He doesn't have any ways to compare it with other farms. He doesn't have any other examples to compare to, right? And so his thoughts are based exclusively in abstractions. And abstractions would not lead you to any concrete and working strategies, unfortunately. I'm not even sure if you function purely in abstractions, you would ever come up with any strategy that you would want to execute, right? So it's has to be a trial and error, and probably trial and error and on the fly strategizing and changing your plans, right? So this is a pragmatic approach to that. And of course, uh, the last point of this uh, speech, I would address it to the fact that the major, said that the uh, human, the man on the farm, has no labor there. And of course, we people know that being a farmer is a very hard job. It's a very hard job, but unfortunately, from the point of view of the animal on the farm, uh, the animal can't see all the nuances and all the extreme difficulties that the person running the farm experiences. Now, I feel quite uncomfortable with the fact that it seems that author here compares proletarians with animals on farm. I feel uncomfortable not because of the analogy between proletarians and animals, because obviously this is a beast fable, beast tale. You kind of, everyone there are supposed to be animals, and I would not take offense to that, but rather the position of proletarians, which is they, as if they do not have the capacity to understand all the nuances and complexities uh, of their, let's say in Marxist terminology, exploiter, right? So animals and men, they have extreme difference in terms of how they uh, well, those are different species, right? So uh, animals and people have extraordinary difference between themselves, and the uh, base of this difference lies in the well, in the DNA, in the difference between species, right? So it's obviously that animals on farms can understand, can comprehend, even potentially can comprehend a lot less than people, and therefore people do not tire themselves with explaining anything to animals at all, right? So there is like an intellectual barrier between them that is so major and so obvious that you don't even have to try to explain it and justify, right? But between people and people, I would not risk saying that such barrier actually exists. Of course, there are people who are, well, let's face it, dumber. Some people who are on more on the genius side, and most of us are somewhere in the middle. But even the dumbest person, if we do not, if we're not talking about some unfortunate medical conditions, even dumbest person is capable to comprehend human interactions, and therefore uh, it would be extremely unethical to not explain to a person what is going on involving him or her life, right? So his or her position in more or less production, in more or less the civilization, right? So my point is, while farmers may hold to their truth and not explain every minute detail to an animal because it is animal, the manufacturer or bourgeoisie absolutely cannot, at no ethical uh, justification cannot justify withholding information from their laborers on the uh, justification of that they would not comprehend because they are what, of different breed, or what is this talk? So this is my final point that I would derive from that text. So sorry for a long off top, but I don't think that this is an off top. And let's get back to the text. Okay, so I finished at the point when he proclaimed somewhat like a call to action: all men are enemies, all animals are comrades. And we already know what this analogies to, right? But let's continue. At this moment, there was a tremendous uproar. While Major was speaking, 4 large rats had crept out of their holes and were sitting on their hindquarters, listening to him. The dogs had suddenly caught sight of them, and it was only by a swift dash for their holes that the rats saved their lives. Major raised his trotter for silence. Comrades, he said, here is a point that must be settled. The wild creatures, such as rats and rabbits, are they our friends or our enemies? Let us put it to the vote. I propose this question to the meetings. Are rats comrades? The vote was taken at once, and it was agreed by an overwhelming majority that rats were comrades. There were only 4 dissidents, the 3 dogs and the cat, who was afterwards discovered to have voted on both sides. Major continued, I have little more to say. I merely repeat, remember always your duty of enmity towards man and all his ways. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. And remember also that in fighting against man we must not come to resemble him. Even when you have conquered him, do not adopt his vices. No animal must ever live in a house, or sleep in a bed, or wear clothes, or drink alcohol, or smoke tobacco, or touch money, or engage in a trade. All the habits of man are evil, and above all, no animal must ever tyrannize over his own kind. Weak or strong, clever or simple, we all brothers. No animal must ever kill any other animal. All animals are equal. Okay, I think this is important, and I have heard some quotations from this book, and I absolutely sure that at some point, spoiler alert, animals would take over the house and will live there. But also, on the other point, not every listed habit of man here is evil. Not even a bad one, right? So just fanatical rejection of habits that would resemble the enemy is, in my point of view, is counterproductive. So I absolutely sure that this also has a lot to do with the Communist Manifesto, and I absolutely fascinated by that because yes, they propose to abolish family in Communist Manifesto, and there were some justification as to that. The family itself was already dissolved for common man anyway, so why we pretend to even have that and whatnot. And I actually, this is one of the arguments that I didn't buy. Well, not as I bought any of that, but this is the argument that I didn't really like at all. And therefore, I see this connection between this small paragraph with the Dick part of the Communist Manifesto. If I remember correctly, it's the second part where Marx and Engels list their understanding of where communists should stand and what should go. Abolition of private property is another example of that, which I do not agree with. Abolition of right of inheritance. So, as if everything that resembles their enemy, all of that has to go. And the analogy that we have here are very clever, all right? So, of course, no animal must kill any other animal. Do not exploit it. Tyrannize his own kind. And this is absolutely reasonable. Some of those habits of man, I would say it is also reasonable to abolish it. Drinking alcohol, smoke tobacco. Sorry, tobacco. And so this is one might connect it with the policies that are like less popular. Those which I listed, right? The abolishment of private property, the abolishment of inheritance, which are not very popular to my understanding, and I would suppose to the contemporary reading of Communist Manifesto. But also they try to get rid of very things that absolutely makes sense, right? So living in a house, it makes sense. It protects you from all sorts of trouble. Sleep in a bed, also it's comfortable. It is good for you. Wear clothes, absolutely. Touch money. This is something of a superstitious side. And engage in trade, which is actually would be beneficial for someone who runs farm, be it man or animal, to engage in trade, to have some means to repair something that would eventually go off, right? And they would like to abolish it too. And to this, I see an analogy in Communist Manifesto in terms of abolishing family, for example, which is, well, it's one of the major things in people's life. Okay, so if not the most meaningful thing in people's life, right? So just abolishing it for the sake of not having anything that would resemble your exploiter, that would seem, I would not agree with that. I would definitely not agree with that. And now, comrades, I will tell you about my dream of last night. I cannot describe that dream to you. It was a dream of the earth as it will be when man has vanished. But it reminded me of something that I had long forgotten. Many years ago, when I was a little pig, my mother and the others so used to sing an old song of which they knew only the tune and the first three words. I had known that tune in my infancy, but it had long since passed out of my mind. Last night, however, it came back to me in my dream. And what is more, the words of the song also came backwards, I'm certain, which were sung by the animals of long ago and have been lost to memory for generations. I will sing you that song now, comrades. I am old and my voice is hoarse, but when I have taught you the tune, you can sing it better for yourself. It's called Beasts of England. Old Major cleared his throat and began to sing. As he had said, his voice was hoarse, but he sang well enough, and it was a stirring tune, something between Clementine and La Cucaracha. The words ran: Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. Soon or late the day is coming, tyrant men shall be o'erthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone. Reins shall vanish from our noses, and the harness from our back. Bit and spur shall rust forever, cruel whips no more shall crack. Riches more than mind can picture, wheat and barley, oats and hay, clover beans and mangel wurzels shall be ours upon that day. Bright will shine the fields of England, purer shall its waters be, sweeter yet shall blow its breezes on the day that set us free. For that day we all must labor, though we die before it breaks. Cows and horses, geese and turkeys, all must toil for freedom's sake. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken well and spread my tidings of the golden future time. Yes, this is a beautiful song that definitely inspires you to look forward for greater times and what and work for it and suffer for it and well bear your cross if you may say so. And this a beautiful end to the speech of the major. Actually he pulled it off very nicely. Well, he is the oldest uh, animal on the farm, right? The singing of these songs threw the animals into the wildest excitement. Almost before Major had reached the end, they had begun singing it for themselves. Even the stupidest of them had already picked up the tune and a few of the words, and as for the clever ones, such as the pigs and dogs, they had the entire song by heart within a few minutes. And then, after a few preliminary tries, the whole farm burst out into Beasts of England in tremendous unison. The cows lowed it, the dogs whined it, the sheep bleated it, the horses whined it, the ducks quacked it. They were so delighted with the song that they sang it right through 5 times in succession, and might have continued singing it all night if they had not been interrupted. Unfortunately, the uproar awoke Mr. Jones, who sprang out of bed, making sure that there was a fox in the yard. He seized the gun, which always stood in the corner of his bedroom, and let fly a charge of number 6 shot into the darkness. The pellets buried themselves in the wall of the barn, and the meeting broke up hurriedly. Everyone fled to his own sleeping place. The birds jumped onto their perches, the animals settled down in the straw, and the whole farm was asleep in a moment. Well, I can certainly say that this really feels like a tale, that you would read when you were a kid, right? Beautiful images, very something very uniting about that, very precious, and I like that first chapter. It seems like so uniting, and well, who doesn't like unity? Who doesn't like when people or animals in that case come together, they agree upon things, and they really set collective goals for a better future to actually like attain a better life for themselves and for each other, or at least in this moment they were, and we'll see how the things will turn out later. Well, this is a perfect place to stop the reading of Animal Farm for today. I actually surprised how well this is written, how easy it is to read, how insightful it is just from the get-go, just from the first couple of paragraphs, or even from the first one. I don't remember, but I would actually read it with great pleasure just for the sake of the story. But in terms of it historical analogies that are obvious here at this moment, this is a fascinating, absolutely fascinating piece of literature. So uh, I guess I'll absolutely continue to read it later in the future streams, and I would invite you to join me for them as well. So everyone who watched this, who listened to it, I would say thank you, and I'll see you sometime soon. Farewell. Bye bye.